the importance of Central Asia is quite evident. But if you look for the last 20 years, most of the stans have been ruled by former communists. I mean, they were the boss in the Soviet Union area, and they remain to be boss after independence. You see also that some sons are successors to the fathers. So there is a kind of monarchy system in some of the stans. The Central Asia doesn't get much attention from political movements. Maybe the Socialist International is a little bit active because they're not so choosy. They pick friends from any part of the political spectrum. The Christian Democrats, well, surely they don't have feet on the ground there. And Liberal International should look at the options to get involved, because there are movements for democracy, for human rights, and I'm very happy that Nick Clegg, the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, made quite clear that in the OSCE we should take a more active position, helping democracy flourish in Central Asia. So I agree with our friend Nick Clegg. If you look at issues ahead, we, international community, Liberal International, ALDE, ELDR, has to decide whether we directly couple democracy, human rights, civil liberties to trade, energy trade especially, or that we have a two-track approach in which we have economic relations, not much affected by policy and politics, and we have human rights policies through OSCE, but also to party contacts to support human rights activists. I'm very glad that we have amongst us people who are involved in Central Asia. First, I would like to hand over the chair to Jelko Kacin, a colleague from the European Parliament, and of course also a bureau member of Liberal International, one of our vice presidents. And I would like then to give the floor to Jelko. Jelko, please.
Thank you very much, Jan. First of all, I need to apologize for the delay. It's happening all around Europe, and Brussels is not an excuse or an island isolated from the European Union and our traffic problems, which we need to overcome. I hope that later on some of our colleagues will be able to join us. They are on their way, and it is our sincere wish and expectation that we will really create a mosaic of different perceptions of common challenge that is called Central Asia. We have many events in these days here in our building. I was just participating at the beginning of one conference that is dealing with Southeast Asia. But Southeast Asia is, to be honest, much more visible than Central Asia. And we simply need to pay much more interest for the development in this region. What I want to say at the early beginning, it is not correct and fair if we observe the Central Asia just from the energetic point of view. This can really disturb us and can mislead us to forget about basic stance and positions and values that we liberals are struggling for. It's about human rights, and it's about democracy, and it's about the market economy. As Jan already said, there are clans, there are dynasties that are trying to control everything. But to be honest, it is time now to do much more to create long-term stability. And there is no stability without democracy. In the cases where these family dynasties are controlling everything, at the end of the day, there is always an earthquake. But we want to see a predictable stable, and fruitful societies and economies. Again, concerns for human rights in Central Asia should not be overridden by our energy policy. The second point that I want to underline is that we need to come closer to the Central Asia. It would be wiser and very fruitful for us if we are able to observe Central Asia from Istanbul. From that point of view, situation looks completely different. And this means that this part of Asia can really contribute to stability, not just of the region, but to stability of a much wider part of globe. I'm not talking just about energetic stability when Russia already promised and signed contracts that they are not able to fulfill. We simply need to do much more together, to aware that we have a lot in common. All these countries have the names finished by stan. Stan means state. And this state cannot be just countries. They need to be states. And to make states, there is a long path to make a state of law a reality. That's why we should encourage the reformist forces in these countries to do much more and to speed up these reform processes. I will come back to the energy supply in Europe. The lessons that we learned is that we cannot depend just on one source. We cannot be just strategic partners for Russian Federation. We need to diversify our cooperation. And in this respect, there is a lot of work for us to do in region of these 5 Central Asian states. I hope that during today's debate we will be able to tackle many of these sensitive and maybe forgotten or missed opportunities. That's why our perception of Central Asia must be much more colorful and much more realistic, comparing with our predictions that were part of our perceptions so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I welcome also Annemie Nijts, the president of ELDR, who is in our midst. Thank you, Annemie. And I will give the floor to Markus Leuning, who is Special Coordinator for Human Rights of the German government. Markus, please.
Hans, thank you very much. If we're talking about Central Asia, we should look at what our interests are, what do we want in Central Asia, and then define what kind of political steps we can take and we should take. What we have done as European Union, but also as individual member states, is that we have really pushed our policies towards Central Asia since 2001, since the attacks on 9/11, but also since we are all engaged in Afghanistan, because we need to have closer cooperation with our friends in Central Asia. Germany, for example, has a military base in the south of Uzbekistan, which is vital to provide our troops with all they need and to move the troops in and out. So we have a keen interest from the military point of view and in good relations with the countries in the region. There are other member countries that have military bases in other places, like France is in Dushanbe, in Tajikistan. Americans are in Kyrgyzstan, using an airbase in Kyrgyzstan. So it means that what I want to say is that our troops in Afghanistan and our engagement in Afghanistan is heavily depending on good relations and solid relations with some of the with all of the Central Asian states. So that is one very clear interest which we have to state and which we have to say, frankly. But we have other interests in the area. One has been, Hans has mentioned one, that is energy. Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are major providers of gas and oil. They have about 4 to 5% of the world reserves of oil and gas, so they are major providers of oil and gas. And if we want to reduce our dependence on Russian oil and gas, it is very important to find other sources. And one of the possibilities are Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan to a certain point, that could bring gas to the Nabucco pipeline through the Caspian Sea. So energy certainly is very important to us. There are other products that could come from the regions, like rare earth. We have the debate now with the Chinese on rare earths, and the Chinese are trying to reduce the export of rare earths from China, and we're very depending on getting these metals that are used in phones and all sorts of technology, and we need them desperately. And if the Chinese are being tough on us on these materials, it's very important for us that we find other sources of providing our industry with these important raw materials. And one of the possible solutions could be to import these from some of the Central Asian states. We also have common interest in fighting terrorism, which we see, especially Islamic terrorism, which is quite active in the region. There are Islamic groups or Islamist groups in most of in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, which are and the regimes there, the governments there have the same interests actually as the European governments to fight these terrorist groups. So that is a point where we have a common interest. And drug trafficking is a big point of common interest. The countries of Central Asia have the same interests as the European countries to stop the drug trafficking, to fight the drug trafficking, with all the heroin coming in from Afghanistan and taking the route via these countries. So I believe it is important that we very clearly say what our interests are. What we should not do is overstate the trade we have, because you've been talking about trade. We do not have such major trade exchange with these countries except Kazakhstan, where we have major investments in the oil and gas industry. But in most other countries, from our point of view, the investments are minor. We have German companies have some investments in Uzbekistan. They have, I believe, MAN is producing trucks over there. But it's nothing where we could say, you know, this is of major interest. The sums involved are not so big, and to be honest, the countries are not really friends of free trade. They're actually closing their countries. They're being very difficult about money coming in, about products coming in. They're being very difficult about money going out and products going out. So they are not a very friendly environment for trade and for investment so far. We have strategic interests in the region, stability, and so on, and the other issues I talked about. And we have to see that other powers are trying to get a grip in the region, especially China. China is being extremely active on different levels. They're investing money, they're sending in people, they're sending in investments. They have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a tool that the Chinese are using to get more influence on the Central Asian countries. The Chinese are buying gas and oil from these countries, or are wanting to do that. And the Central Asian countries have an interest in diversifying their export of oil and gas, because the Russians have not proven to be the most reliable partners, especially now during the financial crisis. They said, well, we cannot actually take all the gas we have ordered, and we cannot pay you. which created quite some problems. So I believe there are some options there. We have some strategic interest to be short on the human rights situation, on the democracy situation. When things happened in Kyrgyzstan last year, I thought it was very important that we show a sign of support for what was happening in Kyrgyzstan. Nobody knew where it would be going. But there were people there saying, we want more democracy, we want more human rights, we want more rule of law. And I think it was very important that Bernard Kouchner and Guido Westerwelle went there to give a sign of support, because that is what we can do. We can give political support. The change needs to come from within the countries, and from the outside we can support change, but we cannot implement change from the outside. And Kyrgyzstan certainly is the country where the strongest impulse for change has been there over the last months and years. In most other countries there is, I mean, you've talked about former Soviet people being in power, and we all know what kind of concept they have on democracy, human rights, and so on. It's, I would say, a rather limited concept. There has been some small progress on human rights, but really some small progress only. Human rights situation in most of these countries is bad, and it has not been really improving over the last year, with some small exceptions. So we should be aware of that, but we should also be aware that if we want to improve the support, the change, and towards better human rights in the area, we will need to engage. And we should be so honest to say what we did after Andijan happened with the boycott, the European Union then, and with the sanctions we imposed on Uzbekistan. We should be so honest to say that it did not work. We did not achieve the goals we set ourselves with these with this boycott and with these sanctions. So sanctions don't seem to be the right way to change things. I believe the right way to change things in Central Asia is engagement. It's a long way, but we'll have to keep on engaging in the area. Thank you.
Then I would like to give the floor to Annemie Neyts, of course, President of ELDR, but also Coordinator for Foreign Affairs of the ALDE Group and former President of Liberal International. Annemie.
Thank you, Hans. Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here in the European Parliament. Dear friends, my problem being the last speaker is that I actually don't have much to add to what has been said before. And more so because I can't pretend to be an expert on Central Asia. I'm not, so I'm not going to pretend to be that. I believe that both what I heard from what Jelko said and what Marco said is our current thinking on Central Asia. And the only personal element, well, I could add a few ones, but one is that I have flown over that region by day several times, or else in midsummer when it's day almost 24 hours out of 24, and even then, while flying, you realize how huge this territory is, and how I don't want to sound disrespectful, but how relatively empty it is, which means that when you fly over it and you look down and you see these beautiful landscapes, you can only wonder what's going on there. You realize that we probably have no idea or no exact idea. Anything could be happening or not at all. And you also realize what immense challenges any infrastructure is. To provide roads, utilities for a sparsely spread population over these huge territories implies incredible investments. And we know that they have a lot of raw materials, and so there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges, challenges in the purely territorial sense of the word, and I believe that indeed there are many reasons why we should pay more attention to what's going on and engage. I believe Marcus is completely right. Over the years we have tried with the European Union to isolate some countries because we deeply disapproved of what was going on there. And I'm sorry to say it has never worked. It hasn't worked vis-à-vis Belarus. It has never worked. So we need to do something else. And probably engaging while remaining, of course, critical and very watchful is probably a better way than turning away from a region or a country because we feel we can't possibly approve or even appear to be approving or to be indifferent to what's going on there. And I believe it in exchange with you to hear what your views are on the subject would be very useful. Apart from that, I would like to congratulate Liberal International on organizing this conference on this theme. Thank you.
According to Sarah Palin, the fact that you flew over Central Asia will make you an expert, I think. Because if she views from Alaska, Russia, she says she's an expert. So you're an expert. Thank you very much for your contribution. Yeah, that's not maybe a compliment, but it's only a joke. So I would like to know who in the public is ready to ask questions or make statements on the policy towards Central Asia, democracy, trade, how to deal with those countries. Who may I give the floor from the side of the audience? Yes, please. Could you state your name and maybe your party and ask the question?
My name is Charlotte Driekman. I'm a stagiaire for ALDE, and I was just wondering what your position was on the PCA agreement with Turkmenistan and the issue now, whether it should be ratified on the part of the European Union or not, and why that would be the case. Thank you.
Maybe Jelko or Annemie on the PCA agreement.
We discussed this in the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I believe there's a majority for ratifying. Isn't that correct? But Jelko will be able to add a few more things on the subject.
As Annemie said before, yes, we failed many times. But if we want to create better opportunities for the future, we need to provide positive vibrations. We need to support cooperation between EU on one hand and every and each individual country in a region. As soon as one country is having this kind of agreement, there is a question in the direct neighborhood why they have and we don't. And this is creating a dynamism which can create better opportunities to speed up the development process. What I want to say is, and what I'm going to say is my personal position. It's not just about 27 individual states, members of the European Union. We have to create our common policy. That's why we need to invest much more, first of all, to know more about these countries and to develop a long-term strategy. And on the other hand, again, we need partners. I believe that Turkey is an excellent partner. There are many colleagues who have reservations concerning the democracy in Turkey. But comparing Turkey with these countries and observing Turkey from these countries, it is not a country with a red flag. It is a country with a blue European flag with yellow stars. It is, how can I say, a pathfinder towards European Union observing from these countries. That's why we together, 27 and Turkey, we could be much more persuasive, much more eloquent, much faster and much more productive. That's why I believe that we need to strengthen our coordination vis-à-vis these countries and these economies.
Thank you. Marcus.
I would like to just like to make a remark on Turkmenistan, because that your question was on Turkmenistan. You should be aware that Turkmenistan takes no foreign investment except from one country, and that is China. And China is investing in the oil and gas industry in Turkmenistan, and we have interests there. So we should be very much into finding ways of getting into Turkmenistan and trying to be engaged with them in the oil and gas industry and in other possibilities. But we have to, I think we really have to push for that. It is in our interest to have relations and to open up possibilities with Turkmenistan.
Others who have questions? Robert Brown, and then you. Robert.
Robert Woodthorpe-Brown, Liberal Democrats. I actually have landed in the area, but not in all of the countries, which is a great regret. But I have been to Azerbaijan and to Kazakhstan on more than one occasion. I think there are various issues that come out of this. Firstly, I would hope that it might be possible for the Secretariat to publish or to distribute a copy of Nick Clegg's OSCE speech last week. I thought that was going to happen, and I would welcome it if the Secretariat could do so, because it was important, because it did stress the fact that no region of the world is exempt from human rights obligations, especially signatories to OSCE. So that is one issue I'd like to take up. Role of Russia and China is important. Russia obviously would like to recreate, at least on an economic level and a semi-political level, the former Soviet Union. And so therefore a lot of it regards a lot of these countries as very much its backyard, although luckily recently Medvedev did allow that the overflight rights should continue for the case of Afghanistan. There are natural cultural similarities. They've been part of the Soviet Union, therefore they're used to one-man rule from the top, and democracy is guided democracy at best. And I think this is an area where we liberals must be trying in fairly infertile ground to sow liberalism, though I realize that's the subject of our second session. The next thing that is important, I take very much on board what was said about Turkey. The first few times that I went to the area, I was always accompanied by a gentleman who is actually now a Turkish MP, because there was very much an affinity in the early 90s between Turkey, who thought this was their backyard, Turkic-speaking peoples, they could try and penetrate. In fact, the Turks didn't do it terribly well. And they didn't make the penetration, and they lost patience rather too quickly. And I don't think they got much further than Azerbaijan in terms of economic penetration. But I think that perhaps we could go into partnership with them, because if only they speak the Turkic languages. But it wasn't successful 20 years ago, and I'm not convinced that is the route, though I think it is one worth exploring. I'm not sure what the latest situation about the Caspian pipeline was. I was very much involved with Gazprom for many years, and Gazprom had the habit of buying gas from Turkmenistan and flogging it for much less than the rates it was able to flog it on for. It acted as it used the Gazprom pipelines as a way of making extra money, and I think the Turkmen have got pretty fed up with that. That is why they were looking for extra routes. Meanwhile, the Russians, of course, try to frustrate this as much as possible, and the Chinese have their little game going whereby they're doing all the investment to try and get the pipelines going through very difficult territory to get the gas and the oil into China. So just a few observations.
I now would like to give the floor to a friend from Sweden, please.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy that we are having this seminar on a very important region that we have been not, I don't want to be harsh and say neglecting, but we have not been discussing it as much as we actually need. As I see it, is that maybe we tend within the European countries or in the Western world to care more about the economic prospects of a region rather than the humans of the region, how they are doing, and the political situation there, democracy, human rights, liberalism, liberties, and so on. So that's why I welcome this seminar very much, and that we are actually taking this time and all of us coming here. My question for you is, how could the EU or the European Parliament coordinate with the national parliaments so we have a coherent policy towards that, at least from a liberal perspective? What do you see, where are the arenas where we could cooperate between the national governments and the European Parliament?
Jelko or Annemie or both?
That of course is a huge question and an important issue. You probably know that several times per year we do have joint meetings of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament and delegations of the Foreign Affairs Committees of the parliaments of the member states. And generally we try to select a topic that might be of interest for all of the participants. And for instance, the last one was about the new strategic concept of NATO, and we had the NATO Secretary General appearing before the whole audience. So that would be a forum, a general parliamentary forum where we could put such a topic on the agenda. About coordinating initiatives is even more difficult, because then you need to be fully informed of what everybody does, and that's no easy task. So apart from that, again, when we consider Europe and European parliaments, we could contemplate to put the subject on the agenda of either the next ELDR Congress, when we have a meeting of MEPs and MPs who are present. That's a possibility, or another specific format, but for the next few months I must say that our agendas are so full that I don't very well see where we could insert one more meeting. And of course what is always possible is by way of electronic media communicate with one another and inform one another on what's going on.
Let me start by saying something else. Russia and China are also helping Central Asia, but their help is we give you money, we want your energy, and that is all. Our help goes beyond that. We also want an end to child labor, healthy and secure conditions for people who can express their opinions without being threatened with jail or prosecution. If we want to achieve that, we need to use all the tools that we have. One of the channels is our delegation of European Parliament for relations with Central Asia. But the problem is that whenever our delegation goes there, the partner on the other side is ruling coalition, more or less one-party system, and there is no place for opposition. This is a problem of this kind of dialogue. That's why we need to use other tools. Council of Europe is one of such tools, because there are representatives of national parliaments, and even opposition from these countries is allowed to go there. So what we need to do is to support, to motivate, to assist to the opposition to do much more there. And first of all, when we talk about Council of Europe, it is all about human rights, nothing else than human rights. And this is the topic that which need to be addressed again and again and again. Without that, we will be overloaded by voices coming from Beijing and Moscow, and our efforts might be useless. That's why, again, I will repeat what I have said twice so far. We can achieve much more together with Turkey, with their national MPs going there together with us to ask to give a place and a space for their opposition and to discuss with future opposition that will be able to come to the parliament, because a lot of opposition is out of any parliamentary framework. They are knocking on the doors, but they are not allowed to come into their parliaments. That's why we need to develop special strategies and tactics how to make changes in the future possible.
Thank you. First of all, I think that we could put Nick Clegg's speech also on our website, which makes it accessible to everybody. So maybe the Secretary General can coordinate with Robert that we have it digitally. And I would like now to give the floor to Manfred Eisenbach and then Lamimba. Manfred.
Manfred Eisenbach, FDP Germany and German Group of Liberal International. I was a month ago by chance in Kyrgyzstan, in Bishkek, on a special call of our German Foreign Office and with the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation to counsel the leadership of all those parties who are now in the new elected Kyrgyzstan parliament. And I would like to share two impressions with you. It was really outrageous how Russia is trying to undermine the process which is going on in Kyrgyzstan. The people wanted to get rid of the authoritarian leadership of Bakiev and all the crowds. You can exchange them in those areas. And they decided to implement a parliamentary democracy. So they decided to become, to get a parliamentarian democracy because they have very bad experiences with the strong men and centralized party organizations and so on. So what we have to do is that we have to look after those countries if they have decided in that way, because they are on the road. They will not become from today to tomorrow a wonderful democracy. So it's a long process. They have to fight corruption. They have to implement a working party system. They have what they have now is clientelism. Loyalty is observed so long as you can pay for your loyalty. So you have really to start on the grassroots. And that was the one part of the mission I had to tell people how a parliament can work, how parties should be organized, how party democracy could develop. So in a very basic way and in a very delicate environment. then it came to the new constitution, which was adopted by the Kyrgyzstan people. I guess it was in, when was it, in June or May. It was before the riots in Osh. And, well, it is clear that hardly anybody has read the constitution. But they have some decisions between how the political life should be organized. And as a dedicated constitutional lawyer, I read the constitution, the English text. The first time I read it twice, and then I had some questions there. Well, how did it come that on one hand you have the parliamentary democracy with the responsibility of the Prime Minister to the Parliament. On the other hand, you have a very strong president who is elected by the people, not by the Parliament. And so you have an implemented conflict in your constitution. So you had your elections, you have now a five-party system in the parliament, and you are about to form a coalition, which is difficult enough. But next year, Rosa Otunbayeva will leave office, and you have presidential elections, and the Russian government will be very anxious to corrupt the newly elected government in order to, or by means of implementing a new strong person of a party perhaps which is heavily supported by Russia. They will try it again. They put a lot of money to last campaigns in Kyrgyzstan, but it was not successful. You have five parties and all are pretty even. So I asked, who does it come that, who did it come that they have that decision in the Constitution? And then I was told, yes, it was by advice of the OSCE. OSCE who was going to the place. Yeah, the Venetian group, and so I was told a lot of things. To make a long story very short, they sent two Georgian people to Kyrgyzstan to advise them on the constitution. And so I'm aware that Georgia is on the road to democracy, and they have their own difficulties a lot. But I cannot understand how we can ask the OSCE to send people for constitutional advice to that region who have a very, very short idea how democratic rule should work out. And I think we should have a very close eye on that, that if we send advisors to the region, that we send advisors to the region who have the integrity to advise them.
Very important remark. Lamine Ba, who is also on the Bureau of Liberal International. Lamine.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And I do very much hope that there is simultaneous interpretation. Yes, there is. You may speak French. You may speak French, indeed. Otherwise, I can speak German. No, I'll speak French. I'll speak French. Chairman, first, I should like to express my gratitude to you for having organized this conference. It affords us an opportunity to meet people who are symbolic of liberalism, such as Madame Nates. When we talk about liberalism in Central Asia, Madame Nates, who has helped development of liberalism in Africa, can certainly lend a hand. She certainly has experience in the area. For Africans, Madame Nates has certainly contributed to promotion of liberalism on the continent in the 80s. And so I would like to laud her for the efforts she's made for the benefit of our region. Africa is present at this meeting. We continue to draw inspiration from what is being done elsewhere on other continents. Since 1980, we have enjoyed a wave of liberalism in our country. It's a work in progress, and we're very interested in seeing what is happening in Central Asia in this respect. Liberalism is not just political, it is economic in nature. And it seems that Central Asia is moving towards liberalism in its economy, a market economy, a socially informed economy as well. I do have a question, however, regarding the role of China in this area. What is the role of China in this area? Here we're talking about Central Asia. I take the view that the expansion of China is in the process of penetrating the whole of the continent, and that is true in Africa as well. We've heard that from our counterparts that the Chinese are communists, yes, but they're in the process of moving towards a market economy. We're very interested in seeing how that is going to pan out. Do we need, as liberals in Europe, to clarify our relationship with these countries whom we accuse of having infringed or violated human rights? And in so doing, could we not influence political developments? Are there not any possibilities for engaging in discussions to this effect with the Chinese? It seems that there is something to explore there. I'd like to talk about Côte d'Ivoire. We can't go anywhere in the world today without talking about Côte d'Ivoire. I know there's a press conference this afternoon, and I would urge everyone to come along. All of the efforts we've deployed for the last 20 years in Africa to promote liberalism risk failing if we leave the situation to stagnate. We've got Africa, Asia, Latin America. We've got a network of liberals. And I would urge you to take up the question of Côte d'Ivoire. This afternoon we have a press conference. We would like our colleagues, our liberal colleagues from the various continents to come along. Madame Aung San Suu Kyi is a hallmark figure on that continent. We would like your support. Please do come along. Please do come along this afternoon to the press conference. Please help liberalism in Africa by attending the press conference this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lamine. And all of us know you're a minister in the Foreign Office of Senegal for International Cooperation, and you're also the chairman of the African Network of Liberal International. I would like to give Marcus Learning first the floor, and Annemie and Jelko if they want.
Thank you. I would like to start by making a remark on what Lamine Ba said on China. When I was visiting Kyrgyzstan in 2003 for the first time, what they told me, and actually I not only encountered that in Kyrgyzstan, what they told me is the Chinese are here, they're buying everything. So what they do is they come in at the political level, they come in at the big economic level with big companies, setting up infrastructure, making big investments in the oil and gas industry. But what they also do is they buy land. They buy land, they use the land for farming. They create trouble because Chinese farmers then all of a sudden are twice as effective as the local farmers. But they are there at all levels, and they know that this area to them is a very important area and that they need to be present. So my feeling is that the biggest political impetus that we see in the region at the moment is definitely coming from China. Robert said something about Turkey. I think that basically there's 6 players in the area. It's the Americans, the Russians, the Chinese, Turkey, Iran, and Europe. And the Turks actually failed to establish themselves well in Central Asia because the peoples there, they just had a big brother. And so they thought, well, we don't want to exchange one big brother against another big brother. We don't need that. But of course, Turkish businessmen are very active in the region. They are, I mean, Turkey has a very good building industry. They are very capable. They have a very good industry for Haushaltswaren and all kinds of consumer goods, and they are really busy in the region. They are trying to reach out, but they're, let's say, on a more general basis, their foreign policy is still in the state of developing, to put it that way. So I think they have interest in the region, but they haven't got as far as they wanted to be. I think it's important. It's true what Jelko has been saying, that we need to coordinate with Turkey. You know, that's not a question of membership or anything. We have very similar strategic interests, so we should coordinate with the Turks. I don't think that Iran is coming very far in the region so far. But what I wanted to say something on to make two remarks. One on the question of the economic situation versus human rights situation. I don't think we should see it as versus. We should see the human rights situation and the economic situation. And if we want empowerment of people, they need to have some income. We need to fight poverty. Fighting poverty is fighting for human rights. And we have all sorts of programs where we are doing that. We have development programs in Kyrgyzstan, for example, developing small businesses. And I think it's important that we do that. And it's not something else than fighting for human rights. It is the same thing. People need income. They need food. They need to be able to go to schools. And that is something that we do if we have development programs. And the second remark is about the coordination. We have a common EU Central Asia strategy. We have delegations in not all of the countries, but in most countries. Sweden has picked up after German's presidency, during their presidency, many of the ideas we had, has put in some new ideas into the Central Asian strategy. I think there is quite some effort. There is coordination. It's not that we start from scratch. We do some very good work in Central Asia with the EU Ambassador Morel doing good work. He's very respected in the region. So we are quite active. And we're doing something else in helping to develop the region, and that is we have major programs developing the judicial system. We're working in Uzbekistan and in quite a few of the other countries, educating judges, educating people in prisons, trying to change the situation, improve the situation in prison. So there is major work being done. There is several hundreds of millions of European euro going into these countries for development aid. The last remark I would like to make is on Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is different, and we absolutely and very importantly need to support what is happening there. If democracy and rule of law succeeds in Kyrgyzstan, that will really make a difference in the region. It is so important that we support what is happening there. Kyrgyzstan has always been more liberal than their neighbors. So let's really support them. They need our support. They can really use our support. And the change is really coming from within the country. Let's support that. And that will scare people like Mr. Karimov more than anything else.
About China. After recent NATO summit in Lisbon with Medvedev there, and the verbal announcement that Russian Federation can be sometime in the future a part of missile shield, there was a very strong message to China. The global picture is changing drastically and faster than anybody can imagine or realize. But these poor countries will be again much deeper in a sandwich between Russian Federation on one hand and China on the other hand. But due to the fact that I have mentioned we simply need to coordinate our activities with Russian Federation as well. So there is a place to do something to make this part of Asia more predictable. I don't want to say just more stable. We are looking for them to be more boring, you know. I just want to illustrate that our final objective is to be in much better shape to cope with challenges of a future. Let's talk about 5 years from now on. A lot of things is going to be changed. And that's why we need to reassess again our priorities and our strategic partnership. So China is today more nervous than it was a month ago. China is today #1 player in world economy due to their very rigid stand concerning the exchange rate of their national currency. If they are going to decide something and to change something, this will have the most important impact on a global market, stability of the global markets and global trends. I don't want to say that Russia is not a player, but China is definitely #1 concerning that point of view. I don't want to talk about the size of the economies, but their eventual strategic decision to respond positively on our expectations can really change the global economy. And that's why I would say it's a very right question that you have addressed. Thank you.
When we had a seminar in Moscow last spring that Sasha Tam has helped to organize beautifully, we had discussions on security with the Russians, and one phrase stays with me, that was one of the Russian experts on security saying that, well, he himself saw NATO as a risk but not as a threat, and they also China as a threat. Another Russian said that he thought that it would be a good idea for Russia one day to join NATO. So clearly there were different views, but they would all agree that China poses a real threat, and especially from the demographic point of view. I just evoked the fact that we are talking about vast territories, sparsely populated territories, and that includes, of course, the Far East of Russia, where that is also the case, and where on their side of the border there are something like, I believe, 4 million people, 4 to 10. It depends on what territory you take into consideration. But let's say a limited number of millions. On the other side, on the Chinese side of the border is 125 million people pressing and spilling over. So that is an important element to take into consideration. Now, if I may, I would like to add something on what Lamine said about Côte d'Ivoire. It's a totally different subject, but I believe that we cannot let it pass for what has happened, or what is happening right now in Côte d'Ivoire, not just because Alassane Ouattara is a good friend of ours who has fought a courageous fight for many, many years in very difficult circumstances. And I was wondering whether we shouldn't contact Hans, whether we shouldn't contact the Socialist International to see whether they can do something to calm down Gbagbo, who's, if I'm not mistaken, a member of a Socialist International. Yeah. We should try to do something via that way.
to respond, but we will explain also at the press conference, Liberal International had a strong delegation to Côte d'Ivoire under my good friend and bureau member Shakarov, and it means that also we take responsibility, and we will also contact Socialist International to make them responsible, because indeed the governmental party is a socialist party, like in many countries. So we take that responsibility, and we can also involve ALDE in the European Parliament, posing questions. So we will do this, and it's very good that you raised this issue, and also thank you for that, Lamine. I saw questions by Roger Albiniana from Spain, Catalonia, who is still celebrating the victory in the elections.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you also for organizing the conference. It's a pleasure to be back in Brussels with a victory below our arms. And my question would go back to the issue of China. It's indeed probably the major subject which has already been addressed by many of you, and also by you speakers. Now, Annemie was raising an important topic when it comes to the relationship between Central Asian states and China, the demographic pressure, which is not only an issue that concerns the Turkic states of Central Asia, but also Russia. It seems also clear to me that the complementary relationship, at least from the economic point of view, between the People's Republic of China and the Central Asia states is clear, is obvious. But my question goes to the subject of the ethnic background, because you know that the People's Republic of China has a problem, not a minor one, in the Uyghur administrative region. We account for more or less for 8 or 9 million Uyghurs living in the People's Republic of China. And we also know that there is some common background, ethnical background between some of these states, the Turkic states in Central Asia and the Uyghur people. So my question is whether you think that that this problem that China has can somehow affect their cooperation or their relationship with these states. We know that, of course, China has big interest, economic interest with these states, but I think we should not disregard the ethnical background question, which also creates some tensions sometimes between China and Turkey. And second of all, I don't know if Marcus could address the question of the Naumann Foundation and which work the Naumann Foundation is doing in this region, because when we, and we are going to discuss that on the second panel, when we address the question of how to get established in this region as liberals, I think we need to have a look at our cooperating organizations, be it the Naumann Foundation or be it NDI, and I think it's also because these organizations are present in the region. They have information on the situation there, having contacts with the local opposition politicians, and I think it's relevant that we also kind of look at the work that they are doing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question could be addressed first by Marcus Learning, how to think about international cooperation, also in the liberal family. We, of course, in the second panel, we have also the Naumann Foundation, Mr. Tam on the panel, so we debate this issue as well, but maybe you could say something from your view. And then the position of China, well, I leave that to maybe also Annemie Nets, who has been also to China as president of Liberal International. Okay, Marcus and then Annemie.
Well, on the Naumann Foundation in the region, we have Sasha here, who is the director for this region, so he can tell you all about his work in the region. What I can say is we have great people there, but we don't have enough. We actually would need more people. Sasha's office is in Moscow, and he does some work in some of the countries there, but we would actually need more staff to do that work. We have other German political foundations that have more staff, but basically we're understaffed, especially for the Liberal Foundation, I would say. They're doing great work, but they told me they have Lessing's Nathan der Weise staged on, which is a very old German piece of drama on tolerance and on how Christians and Jews can live together, and that is been staged in Bishkek as in I believe 2 or 3 languages to have like an input into the debate on ethnic dialogue and inter-ethnic tolerance, which I thought was really a fantastic way of making a political input via a cultural mean. And on the Uyghur problem, the Chinese, they're going to be so tough. They don't tolerate that the smallest bit of China will be away from China. They're not going to tolerate that. So they're going to be very tough on that, also in the future.
Annemie.
Although I've often been to various cities and regions in China, I'm afraid that I'm not really an expert on all things Chinese, let alone on the specific situations of so-called minorities in China. I'm quite certain that various Chinese authorities are extremely attentive to the whole situation and probably will take into consideration this situation of the Uyghurs, maybe both in a positive and in a negative sense. But generally, well, at least seen from the outside, it looks like Chinese policy, foreign policy, is extremely well thought out. Is not given to spontaneous impulses and is generally a long-term policy. And so it certainly plays a role. And it probably plays a role in both directions.
Then Jelko and Marcus have something to remark, I think, about the Uyghurs.
When we talk about Uyghur and the Chinese policy, wherever and whatever we are talking about is a Han policy. And when we talk about Uyghur, there is always a danger of ethnic cleansing, to expel Uyghur people to Central Asia. It doesn't cost anything. It can even bring economical and political benefits. So to export the troubles outside of the country, to make situation completely under control and homogenize people inside of China is a strategy. So we need to be very sensitive, and we need to react as soon as this starts happening. It is already happening, but unfortunately it is invisible for the time being for the rest of the world. So it has sense that we liberals would have to pay our attention and to react immediately, very eloquently, and with the strong arguments, with the proofs that it is already happening, because it's not just tactics, it is a strategy to clean up the situation there. Thank you.
Marcus.
I think what the Chinese, what Beijing is doing in Xinjiang is basically they have a multifaceted approach to the area there. One thing is very clear: it has been the Chinese policy now for 2,500 years. No secession will be accepted. That's not specifically communist or anything. It's just has been a long-standing Chinese tradition, and they're not going to change it. So what they are doing is they are fighting very hard any secessionist movement, whether it be the Dalai Lama or whether it be the Uyghur movement in Xinjiang. And they're very tough. They're sending these people to jail. They're shooting people, and so they're being very tough. The second thing they do is they have a policy of resettlement. They're sending in Han Chinese from other regions of the country into these areas, into Xinjiang or into Tibet, so that these people, for example, in Urumqi, which is the capital city of Xinjiang, they're more Han Chinese by now than Uyghurs. And then the third thing they do is they invest. So they try to give a positive perspective to these parts of the countries, because they have, of course, they have seen that these countries, that these parts of the countries were far behind in their economic development. They were far behind in other sorts of developments. So they do invest. We need to acknowledge that they put money into infrastructure. They have big investments in companies. There is quite an economic upswing in these areas, but not the Uyghurs are profiting from that. The jobs mainly go to the Han Chinese, and the money mainly goes to the Han Chinese. So it is you can see some cracking down efforts, you can see some negative efforts by the leadership in Beijing. You can also see the effort to develop some policies that are positive for the region, but obviously these positive efforts don't work very well. They don't work in the way that you would want them to work, to include everybody and to give a perspective to everybody. That obviously does not work.
Thank you for that. I must say, dear friends, I would like to close the first panel, thanking Annemie Nets and Jaco Cassin and Marcus Leuning for their contributions. And we have a second panel, which... Have you a very short question? Is it only allowed a very short question?
Indeed. I would like to make a brief comment for Mr. Marcus. Earlier you raised the question of family dynasties. Do you speak French? You don't need the headsets. Okay, fine. Right, so you talked about dynasties as a political heritage passed on from father to son. This is not specific to Central Asia. There are traditions along these lines existing in other parts of the world. Artistic, sports area, political area is where this often happens because there is a transmission of knowledge as well as social status from father to son. I can give you many examples of this. The Kennedy dynasty existed in the United States. The Bush dynasty in the United States is a case in point. The Gandhis in India, Perón in Latin America, as well as in Lebanon. Thank you.
A very short reply by Marcus Leuning.
No, actually, to my knowledge, in no Central Asian country there is this dynastic question. There are some questions, but so far power has not been passed on from father to son or from father to daughter in any of these countries, as far as I know. Yeah, but that's not a Central Asian country. Well, Mr. Aliyev is Mr. Aliyev, and that's... We're talking about 5 countries in Central Asia, and it wasn't like that in Turkmenistan. It was not like that in Kyrgyzstan. There's talks about that in Kazakhstan. That's true. We don't know what's going to happen in Tajikistan or Uzbekistan. So I don't think that this is a very central question.
Again, Marcus, thank you for your contribution. I would now like to have a very short, please, James, coffee break. Very short is 10 minutes.
I'm head of the regional office or the sub-regional office, as we call it, for Russia and Central Asia of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. I'm based in Moscow, but we coordinate our work in Central Asia and Russia from Moscow as well. We do not have infrastructure, as we call it, yet in Bishkek. Everything is done by our colleagues and partners there. There were some questions on our work in Central Asia. I will say only a few sentences on it. We are working at this moment in 2 countries in Central Asia. This is Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. We cooperate with free market think tanks there, mostly with the Central Asian Free Market Institute, where Mr. Umetaliev is also member of the board, and he's a long-term partner of our foundation there. And we organize education programs, seminars, conferences over there, and we organize events like theater performances of Nathan the Wise Man. We did it 6 weeks ago in Bishkek and in Osh, which was quite impressive, an impressive event for me. And one remark on Kyrgyzstan, Markus Löning already told us that Kyrgyzstan is the exception of all countries there, and he's completely right. From all countries of my region, meaning Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, Kyrgyzstan is the only country where elections matter, where the outcome of election has any importance for the future of the country. In no other countries, elections matter, including Russia. And therefore, for me personally and for our foundation, the work in Kyrgyzstan, it's really important. So, but now, if there are any more questions about our work and our cooperation partners, I'm ready to answer them after our panels, but we are running really out of time, and therefore I want to introduce you, our panelists, and I want to introduce them from our right side, from Ms. Ebadi to our left side. Shirin Ebadi is lawyer, judge, former judge, human rights activist, and she is a laureate of the 2003 Nobel Peace Prize. And we are very happy to have her with us. And she will a little bit later share her views on the region and on the human rights situation in the region with us. To my right, Emil Umetaliev, which is or was the Minister of Economic Development of the transition government of Kyrgyzstan. I think he doesn't know himself whether he is still minister or not, because he's saying that he is still acting minister in the government, but only until tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And he's a real liberal and free marketeer, and he's an entrepreneur which started his business already in 1990. And he supports the work of our foundation with his authority, moral authority, and authority as an entrepreneur in Kyrgyzstan. And he's very big help for us there. And he's the only person here which comes from the region, and he will share his views later with us. To my left, Vilja Savisaar Tomast. I hope I was not so bad. A member of the European Parliament from Estonia. She has long-term experience with the Central Asian region because she worked already from the Estonian parliament on cooperation issues with Kazakhstan and other countries. And she will start now our discussion with her view on ALDE's cooperation with Central Asia. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning for everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I am glad to have the opportunity to address you all in such an important matter as liberalism and democratic movements. Liberalism and democratic movements are very closely connected. They both base on the same value, freedom of choice. I am honored to be such a distinguished company discussing the future of liberalism in Central Asia and fellow liberal democrats. The European Union and Central Asia, through history, was always a place in between. It was a path of prosperity, Silk Way. It was a path of war, torn apart by empires of Asia and Europe. As an Estonian, I am quite well aware of what it was like to live in the Soviet regime and experience at first hand the atrocities that regime has committed against the people of Central Asia or Estonia. Recent years of independence were anything but simple. We still vividly remember massacres of Andean riots in Oz, suppression of the fundamental freedoms in Kazakhstan, or eccentric regime in Ashgabat. These elements speak volume of what incredible challenge liberals have to face in Central Asia. In 2011, the Central Asian republics will experience strong economic expansion, with real GDP growth of 5 to 9% for the region as a whole. The hydrocarbon-fueled economy is the basis for this growth. However, these growth figures will allow for the Central Asian republics to climb out of the bottom ranks for freedom, democracy, human rights, or the rule of law. It is not only bad news from Central Asia, though. While one should not forget the worrying ethnic violence scenes from the streets of Oz, it seems that Kyrgyzstan has scored well in terms of organizing recent parliamentary elections. Let us hope that fragile democracy crash thoughts will survive the cold winter for the presidential elections next year. And now let me underline, in my view, three most important challenges for liberalism in Central Asia and consequently our agenda in Central Asia. Firstly, the human rights and democracy. Continuous lack of progress in this field and persecution of human rights defenders should not go unnoticed. The outgoing presidency country of OSCE, Kazakhstan, has made numerous commitments with regard to creative freedoms and release of political prisoners. How many of those were implemented? What does it say to us about OSCE? Turkmenistan remains an authoritarian regime that puts its citizens under unimaginable oppression. The European Union has a partnership and cooperation agreement signed in 1998. For the last 12 years, this agreement has not been ratified, and for the last 12 years, no tangible change has come out of our political position towards Turkmenistan. What does it say about the European Union? Secondly, regional security. As the international community discusses the situation in Afghanistan and the exit strategy from that conflict, the neighboring countries are often forgotten. Central Asia is critical to the security and sustainability of any future Afghan regime. Transit of supply goods is only one element. What about the Central Asian ethnicities living in Afghanistan? To which extent their potential is mobilized for the stabilization of the region as a whole? Thirdly, alternatives. In the region dominated by interest of two major neighbors, Russia and China, Central Asian republics find themselves short of examples for a political alternative. Growing economic development can offer incentive for change, but also it offers dangers for further usurpation of power to the ruling elite. I am confident that only through intensive contacts between people and genuine effort in the interest of societies, the European Union can offer an alternative vision. It might not be the power broker, but it does offer an attractive alternative. This was a few weeks from ALDE and Liberal Group, and I am grateful for the Liberal International and ALDE for having had the opportunity to discuss this important region today. I remain committed to work further in promoting liberal values in our bilateral contacts between the European Parliament and Central Asian state parliaments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jen. I suggest that we will not have questions and comments right now, but only after all three statements, because we are running out of time. So, please, Emil Umetaliev, The floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, dear liberals, I have been Minister of Economic Regulation. In fact, it's Ministry of Economic Development, but named in previous regime, so name is Economic Regulation of the Kyrgyz Republic the past 7 months, that is since the April Revolution. It has been hard to work with those who favor increased regulation and protectionism in the economy. In spite of this stiff resistance, the situation is changing, and increasingly liberalism and free markets have more followers in the government and society. This is to a large extent because the Kyrgyz Republic has the most liberal political and economic system in the Central Asian region. These freedom-loving gangs of Kyrgyz yearn for liberty, which has enabled the people to topple 2 authoritarian presidents in the past 5 years. Other than overthrowing presidents, still there is much to be done. We should work hard to strengthen the rule of law, introduce good governance, simplify taxation, and liberalize trade. Liberals in Kyrgyzstan to pay much attention on implementing these reforms because they are the only ways to develop the country. We have at least 3 non-government organizations promoting classical liberal ideas and principles. The first one is the Bishkek Business Club that we founded 8 years ago. Right now, it's one of the most influential business associations in the country. There is another movement called Liberal Youth Alliance. They work with young people by conducting discussion seminars and organizing human rights actions. And the third one is an independent think tank, the Central Asian Free Market Institute, that promotes ideas of freedom, rule of law, and market economy through research, education, and advocacy. They expanded their activity to Tajikistan as well, and introduced liberal ideas for more than 5,000 young people within last 2 years. People in Central Asia deserve free market and democracy, whatever their ruling powers say. The Kyrgyz Republic already enjoys this freedom to some extent. Somewhat less in Kazakhstan. There is still very much to be done in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. We are experimenting with the parliamentary democracy that none of the other Central Asian nations has ever thought of. After 2 unsuccessful presidential republics, we became sure that parliamentary democracy is the best way to ensure freedom and civil rights. Surely, in this case, European parliamentary governance is our benchmark. We, the Kyrgyz, understand that we can be a leader in promoting free market and democracy in the region, and we have to share this experience. The Kyrgyz parliamentary democracy can also be a flagship case for all other Central Asian nations. With our joint efforts, I believe someday we can see Central Asia as a region of freedom, prosperity, and peace. I can name 3 most needed experiences and knowledge the Kyrgyz and other neighbors in Central Asia would need from European liberals. First, supporting institutions to study and promote free market and democracy in the region. Improving the electoral system and introducing e-government. opening European markets to Central Asia's goods and visitors. Dear colleagues, Kyrgyz Republic has new challenges and factors for this big crisis which we have in this year. In fact, the custom union which is established by Russia, Belarus and Kazakhstan gave new trade barriers to our country. And if in the Soviet period Kyrgyzstan had 4 neighbor countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and China, and Kyrgyz Republic was last point for Soviet Union from the south, and border, ironing border, как железный занавес?
Iron curtain.
Yeah, yeah, was from China. Today, you can be surprised. We have normally working border with China and normally working border with Tajikistan. But from the west and from the north, from the west, fully closed border by Uzbekistan, and from the north, which is more important for the trade relations to Kazakhstan and to Russia, it's a border with Kazakhstan, opened partly, only 4 points from 12 is open partly, not normally working. So you can see how is it blocking the country since April of this year. And we have a new shock for the economy because we imported oil from Russia, and from the spring of this year we have new prices with the new tax, with new taxations, custom taxation from Russia, and today price for oil increasing higher than 30%, and it's coming higher, nearby 40% higher than before. It's a really big shock to our economy, especially for the agriculture, which is a big part, little bit half of our economy. And Kyrgyzstan, for my opinion, has to buy oil by market price, but our economy was not ready for that, and today it's very hard to work with in the same situation, but no changing. Of course, economy of Kyrgyz Republic should diversify the economy. But in fact, during all of these 20 years, we tried to do something, but not all what we should know to do. And in general, I think politically was not ready to diversify enough to this time. Our roads, land roads, mostly going to the Russia. For example, railway going only to one way to Moscow, and no any other rail roads. Land roads we had to Uzbekistan, to Kazakhstan. Today I explained how this road blocked on the borders, and we have 2 roads, one more developed, another one less developed to China. But those roads operating, but it's not even not
it's only a gravel. That's,
yeah.
Only a gravel road, yeah.
Yeah, and our sky roads, most popular still by Aeroflot to Moscow. Second Airlines is coming competitive, but less than roads to Russia. It's Turkish Airlines to Istanbul. That's all. no airlines, no developed airlines to other destinations. It's we have a new road to Urumqi, but it's still limited flights. I support the idea of one of the speakers on the first panel about cooperation with Turkey. And please be attentive to the fact young generation of Kyrgyz is coming more supported by Turkish educational system, which created some schools and university in Kyrgyzstan, and those generation don't keep in mind Soviet mentality. They are more free and they are more patriotic and they more loyal for the democracy. And they are some opposite for the radical Islamic groups. They are religion, strong religion, but not radical, and they are more liberalized religion generation, and they are coming more and more strong part of will in the population, which are coming closely to the power in nearest future. So cooperation with the Turkey to more understanding and loyalty with this part of our population should be very fruitful. And so I support the idea to open office in Bishkek, which will be very important not only to keep the European values in Kyrgyzstan, but to keep to distribute this promoting and contacts and cooperation with all Central Asian countries. You know, in fact, today, if I can simplify, Kyrgyzstan share it between four powers: China, Russia, Islamic, and West countries. China control more trade and infrastructure and investing on this. Russia controlling information, political system, and military. Islamic control spirits, especially of the poor people. And in the situation with authoritarian regimes and less rule of law, they can control more and more people who are not who are unhappy with this in the life. And the West countries, I can say, control intellectual power in the countries and maybe more and more contributing to the changing the political system to the democracy. But we have to know all our neighbors, all the neighboring countries of the Kyrgyz Republic don't like evolution of a parliamentary system in Kyrgyzstan. And they supported those new fast-growing political parties which became winners in the election. Kyrgyz Republic had first transparency election in November. On the 10th of November, we elected parliament by new parliamentary system-oriented constitution, and 5 political parties became as winners. President and government did not push, did not falsify this election, but it not seems nobody did not interrupt to this election. We had some new terribilities with the election, and political parties which declared their following to the Russia policy and which declared their aim to change the political system and return back to the presidential system and to be the trade union member for the country, they became as winners. And after the first 15 days, which President gave to the one political party to establish a coalition, was not successful. And today, President gave, not today, 2 days ago, President gave a chance to another leader of another political party to organize the coalition. And time will show, but this political party is not so radical, but they also declared their following to Russia policy more than others. Thank you very much for your attention. Anyway, I look forward to working with you. I am first time here in this type of meeting, and we really hope we can bring changes in Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia together.
Thank you very much, Emil. And now I would like to pass the floor to Shirin Ebadi to share with us her views, first as an Iranian, because we've heard that Iran is also a major player in the region and has some influence, and also as a human rights activist. So what do you think about Central Asia and the human rights situation there?
I'm afraid what I'm going to tell you is very disappointing. The situation in Central Asia is not good in any of the republics. It's not good in Russia, it's not good in Kazakhstan, it's not good in Turkmenistan. I've been to all these Central Asian republics. I was in Ashgabat. And you know the people in Ashgabat? Or I should say that for Turkmen people to visit their capital, Ashgabat, they needed a visa. But allow me, but I'd like to allow others to speak about their own respective countries, and I would like to focus on my own. You, dear guests here, you are members of liberal parties, and you're among liberal people. In my country, government newspapers whenever government papers want to offend people like me or other defenders, they accuse us of being liberals. And in our government language, being a liberal is an offensive term. A liberal person in their belief is someone who does not believe in the Islamic Republic. A liberal is someone who has an ideology which is nonconformist. And that is the situation in my country. In my country, we had a revolution some 31 years ago, and our regime became an Islamic Republic. In the past 31 years, Iran has had some 25 resolutions issued against it for violating human rights. The latest of these resolutions was endorsed in December 2009. And again, this year, the General Assembly, in General Assembly in December 2010, intends to endorse yet another resolution against Iran. And Iran is charged with violating human rights. Now, why is Iran getting so many resolutions? Why are so many resolutions being issued against Iran? The official religion in Iran is Shiite Islam. And based on the constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Christians, Zoroastrians, Jews, they have all been officially recognized. Yet other religions, because they are not acknowledged as official religions, they have been deprived of all their rights. We have some 300,000 members of the Baha'i faith in Iran. And these Baha'is have no rights whatsoever. In fact, since the beginning of the 1979 revolution, these Baha'is have not been allowed to enter universities and study. Christianity, Zoroastrians, and Judaism, yes, they are officially recognized religions. Yet, there is discrimination even among these three members of these three officially recognized religions and Muslims. I'll give you an example. Based on the law in Iran, if a Muslim is killed, and the person who's been charged with the murder of that person fails to be forgiven by the family of that person, he will be executed. But if a Muslim kills a Christian, and does not manage to get the consent and forgiveness of the family of the victim, that Muslim will not be sentenced to death, and he will be at the most sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Our religion is Shiite Islam, as I said. Yet, in the capital Tehran, which has a population of some 12 million people, the government does not allow the Sunni sect of Islam to build even a single mosque. So which such laws that I've mentioned and which such ideology, now you can understand why when the government in Iran wants to offend somebody, they accuse that person of being a liberal. In other words, you don't think the same as we do. And anyone who does not conform to the ideology of the government belongs to a prison cell. Today in Iran, it is Student Day. And at present, because of the student protests, we have over 100 students behind bars in prisons. Based on a report by the Reporters Without Frontiers organization, out of 175 countries, Iran ranks as in the bottom of that list. In fact, it's the same rank as North Korea and Eritrea. Today, we have over 40 journalists in prisons in Iran. Not only we have journalists and students in prison, but we also have defense lawyers in prisons. And why are these defense lawyers in prisons? Because they defended political activists. Today we have 6 defense lawyers in prison. Iran has the highest number of juvenile executions, children under the age of 18. In the whole world, Iran has the highest number. And after China, Iran ranks second as in terms of executions in general. And in taking into perspective the population in Iran and in China, then you can see that really Iran has the highest number of executions in the world, percentage-wise. Two days ago, in one of Iranian cities called Kermanshah, they cut off the hand of a thief. After the 1979 revolutions, punishments such as stoning, amputation of hands, crucifixion, and flogging entered our judicial system. And all these factors have caused the Iranian people, who are highly civilized and highly cultured, to become unhappy with the government and to protest against the government. The situation of the Iranian women is very discriminatory. According to a law that was endorsed after the revolution, women are considered to be half a human being. I'm going to highlight a few discriminatory laws. Based on Iranian law, the value of a woman's life is half that of a man. So, for instance, if a man and a woman happen to be walking along the street and they're involved in a car crash, the award, and they are injured equally, the compensation awarded to the woman is half that awarded to the man, although they have been equally injured in this accident. The testimony of 2 women is tantamount to the testimony of a man in the court of law. A man is allowed to have 4 wives. And that is while from years ago, over 65% of students in Iranian universities have been women. In other words, Iran is a country in which highly educated women outnumber the educated men. Many of our lecturers at universities are women. And this government is imposing such discriminatory laws on Iranian women. And that is why our women have protested. But the response to their protests is imprisonment. Currently, we have some 30 women in prison because they objected to these discriminatory laws. And now you can add to all that the growing poverty in Iran. Iran is a very rich country. It has plenty of oil, it has gas, it has uranium, it has copper. We have very rich resources. However, there is corruption and also the really high military expenditure. And it has always supported the Iranian government because of its interest, and the same applies to China. And, they have told me that I've run out of time now. So because I respect your time, I conclude my speech, although I have much more to say, and I can talk to you until late at night and tell you that the Iranian government is not a good government. And if you are representatives of the people, and if you are in part of your liberal democracy and liberal movements, you must tell your governments not to support Iran, especially Russia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Let me just mention that I'm not Russian and not a representative of Russia. Okay. I'm only working though for some years. Okay, sorry, but we don't have the time. I was informed that we don't have time for any question. It's a pity, but I hope we will have time during lunch or so to discuss some more issues. Just a second. For those who attend the lunch, it will be at 1 p.m. in the ASP building in Members Salon number 1. So that what Emike, as the Secretary General, just told me. I hope everyone knows where this is. And now, thank you very much. Thank you very much, all panelists. No time for questions, it's a pity. But now I pass, yeah, Emil wants to.
Yes, exactly. I feel obliged to explain why actually there is no time for questions. You might have heard that there is going to be an urgent press conference at 12:30 in this building on the ground floor regarding the situation in Côte d'Ivoire, which is going to be attended by the LI President, by the President of the Africa Liberal Network, by Louis Michel, the former Commissioner for International Development, and by Mr. Chakarov, Vice President on the Bureau, who was leading the LI delegation at the end of the campaign in Côte d'Ivoire. Apparently the press conference is attracting quite some interest among the media, and we have to start it at 12:30. That prevents us from having much time for discussion and debate here within the floor, and I have to apologize for that. But as the chair of the panel has mentioned, you're more than welcome for those who have been invited, please indicate for the lunch at 1 o'clock where Madam Abadi and Mr. Umetaliev will be present, and you will be more than welcome to raise any kind of questions over there. And I would kindly request you to remain in this room, because we would be honored to use this opportunity in front of you to award Madam Abadi the highest or the only prize that Liberal International is awarding to the most prominent people who are fighting for human rights, for democracy and for values that we all stand for. And the President will honor the ceremony within 1 minute. Thank you very much for your understanding.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention for an important moment within the Liberal family, of course, especially for Liberal International, but everybody who belongs to our family. And thank you also for Annemie for being present here. You know, we have every year the Liberal International Prize for Freedom, and we give it to a variety of people. They need not be a member of a liberal party, but they are special people who have fought, who are fighting for freedom and democracy, for civil liberties, for human rights. People who make a difference. So people don't get it because they're president or chairman or chairwoman of an organization. No, they themselves have made a difference. And of course we look for every year for a person who can do something with our Freedom Prize. It's not only for things which people have done, but what they can do with the prize. And I'm very proud that our sister organization, the Liberal Democrats from the United Kingdom, Robert Woodward Brown in the first instance, came up with the name of Shireen Ebadi. And for many reasons. For the fact that she has always spoken out for people who needed help, assistance, women, children. She is a staunch supporter of the rule of law. She was on a city court in Tehran in the 70s. Also there she proved to be an independent judge, not favoring the present or the current regime at that time, but administering law. In this period she was also a beacon of hope for many people. And she kept on doing so, also after the Iranian Revolution, speaking out for those less privileged, speaking out for the rule of law, children and women. And she had to decide after a period to go abroad, to go to Britain, where she lives, because she can work on human rights from Britain, but it is very difficult to work on human rights from Iran itself. So she is a very courageous but also a wise woman. And for that reason alone, she should have been given the Ally Freedom Prize. But there is more to be said, because Iran is a very important country, not only in its region. It's a very old culture, it's a very old language. It is a country with a very interesting background. I mean, in the last 50 years, women were able to play a role, even under very difficult circumstances. There is a kind of civil society, which is not only dominated by the current regime. So opposition is possible, but very hard. And if you look at the position of Iran in the region, Iran could bring peace to the region or instability. Both is possible. We have seen people going to the streets the last year, and the rebellion for democracy was put down in a harsh way. But students, women, people of various classes, believers, non-believers, from various ethnic backgrounds, people want to be open to the world again. not the regime, but the people want cordial and friendly relations. So if there is one country which we should focus us, if there is one country where courageous people are working for democracy and human rights every day, it's Iran. So by giving the 2010 LI Freedom Prize to Mrs. Shirin Ebadi, is acknowledging her personal efforts and also what she can do in future, but it's also making clear that Iran is not seen as a lost case by Liberal International and the Liberal family, because we believe in the people of Iran. Those people who are wanting to create peaceful relations outside, who want to democratize their country. And for that reason, those two reasons, I would like now to hand over the Liberal International Freedom Prize 2010 to Mrs. Ebadi, and then I would like to ask Nicola Rinaldi of the ALDE group, who is in charge also of international relations, to say some words on behalf of the Liberals in the European Parliament. Mrs. Ebadi, I herewith give you the 2010 Freedom Prize of Liberal International. We are proud to have you here. We are proud that you're now part of the group of people who have been given this prize and organizations and which are in our heart. You have our fullest support. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen. I will ask Mr. Rinaldi to say some words, and then I will give the floor to Mrs. Shirin Ebadi herself. Mr. Niccolo Rinaldi.
Thank you very much, Hans. I'm extremely honored to be here on behalf of the entire Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, our parliamentary group. We have established, I think, an excellent partnership on a number of initiatives with Liberal International that we see as not only our sister and wider organization, but as a constant source of inspirations. I think this prize is particularly important. There is more and more a sort of stereotype about Iran in the European media, in the European institutions, in European citizenship, as a country of Ayatollahs, a country extremely opposite to a secular society, a country of darkness, a country of systematic violations of human rights. We do know that this is unfortunately something that to some extent is true, but we also know that there is another side of Iran, which is the Iranian people fighting, the students, the women, the artists, a number of politicians, including some people within the, how you say, the clergy, the clerical people who have a much more reformed approach. Not only that, Hans said something about the ancient civilization of Iran. Iran has been engaging with Europe since the very, very beginning through Persia and Greece. And our most ancient literature already refers to Persia and to Iran as a proper interlocutor for Europe and as a proper interlocutor to shape our own common identities. I have a memory about my visit in Iran. It was something which I never witnessed anywhere else. It was in Shiraz. It was the grave tomb of a great poet dating from the Middle Ages. And there was a family there, a family, an ordinary family, as much as I could understand, who was paying a visit, paying a tribute to this tomb of somebody who had lived something like 700 years ago, a famous poet. And the kids, 2 kids of this family, were asked by the parents to say by heart a number of short poems of this poet which was buried over there. And at the end of what they said, the parents give them some candies. And people who were with me explained me that that is sometimes done in order to educate the youth to combine the beauty of poems and the beauty of sweetness. And I thought that was a lesson coming from Iran, coming from contemporary Iran, not talking about decades ago, which is extremely instructive also for our own society. I think what is also lost in the recent years of darkness in Iran is the difficulties for the Iranian civilization to express itself and to give to the West what we would like to have from Iran, which is this constant source of inspirations, of beauty, of deeply intellectual reflections that still we can see, for instance, by a number of Iranian artists active or filmmakers active in the international scene. So, Hans, I would like really to thank very much Liberal International for these decisions to deliver the Freedom Prize to Mrs. Shireen Ebadi today. Iran has never been forgotten by the liberal family, not at all, indeed. The commitment that we need to undertake is a long commitment, like the ones that you have been discussing this morning concerning Central Asia, which is often a neglected area of action in terms of political initiative. And I do regret that I didn't have the possibility to attend the seminar. I also expected it was still to be ended, but this is indeed the perfect conclusion of this morning. And Mr. Shireen Ebadi, good luck. I think a prize is an excellent thing because it is a collective recognition of what you are doing, what you have been done from all liberal Democrats across the world. But a prize, it is something nice, but it's never enough, because clearly this is a commitment for all of us to still follow very closely the situation in Iran and to be as much as possible constructive, concrete, helpful in making a new Iran very quickly possible in the international arena. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Niccolo. I just got a request for a very short intervention by Mrs. Sidi, who is active in the International Network of Liberal Women. I clock 3 minutes, please. Leave it to me. Trois minutes.
You have 3 minutes speaking time, madam.
Voilà. Bon. Pardon? Come on. Allez, qu'est-ce qu'il dit? L'ALDE se penche sur les...
Well, my organization is very concerned about human rights throughout the world, particularly threats to women. Despite the remarkable evolution of human society, discoveries, advances in science, human rights remain our Achilles heel. And we have got bogged down. On the one hand, we focus upon recognition of the need for governance, etc., but we focus overly much on relationships amongst states to the detriment of human rights per se. And the rights of women, respect of women is of utmost importance and is shored up by international criteria to that effect, and is a measure whereby we can gauge advancement in human society, and yet there are violations of these rights. Crimes against humanity, as well as violations of rights, and rape is the end result of a line of reasoning which co-opts human rights for other ends, economic and political. Granting this award to Madame Ebadi bears tribute to the indissociable link existing between modernity and liberalism. Women as a citizen and the legal and political aspect of modernity are reflected by human rights, and this has allowed us to take a look at specific features of cultures, whilst coming to the conclusion that there is no cultural explanation for exempting people from the respect of human rights. In Sudan, India, and Afghanistan, we can see how this is true. There is intolerable lack of respect for human life, excision of young women, ritual excision or a rape, illiteracy in many parts of the Islamic Arabic world are scourges against women, and this should constitute a fillip or an encouragement to international powers and governments to force them to defend dignity and freedom, and the dignity and freedom of women. There are many parts of the world where human rights have advanced in an exemplary fashion, such as Tunisia. However, today, those advances are being threatened because of social tensions, and this threatens a return to fundamentalism. This trend is amplified by high rates of unemployment amongst youth against the backdrop of deficits in secular democratic traditions. Fundamentalism is becoming an international force thanks to support from specific countries whereby they enjoy financing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention, and I give the floor to Mrs. Ebadi.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful to you for having provided me with such an incentive, and I'm very honored to accept this award. And I would like to dedicate this award to all those in my country who are behind bars because they wanted freedom. I dedicate this award on your behalf to all Iranian political prisoners, and thank you very much for remembering the situation of human rights in Iran and paying attention to it. In the past few years, whenever the subject of Iran has come up, it has been about the nuclear energy issue. And it appears that the world has forgotten that Iranian people are being killed and they're being imprisoned. I would like to speak very briefly about, I have spoken very briefly to you about the violation of human rights in Iran. And I would like to add to that now that the economic growth in Iran in the past year, and that's according to international statistics, has been 1.6, which registers the lowest growth in the whole of the Middle East. In other words, sadly, Iran is lagging behind even Afghanistan and Iraq. And the reason for that is because democracy and human rights in Iran is not respected. And because of that lack of democracy and human rights, no one has the courage to invest in Iran. The Iranian government is insisting on enriching its uranium. And the Iranian government claims that that is what the Iranian people want, that the Iranian people want nuclear energy. But I would like to say to you that that is not what the Iranian people want. And why? Because the first nuclear power plant in Iran, which is based in Bushehr, was constructed after some 30 years by Russians and at a very great cost. And the Russians, on several occasions, kept increasing their price and the cost of the nuclear plant. And ultimately, after 30 years, this nuclear power became operational. And the government in Iran is very happy that in the next month, it will be able to generate electricity and distribute that in the country. But we, Iranian people, we believe that Iran is a country that has a lot of sunshine. And with a tenth of the money spent on the nuclear plant, we could have had solar plants. We have a lot of wind in northern Iran. We could have had many wind turbines in Iran. Yet they did not pursue any such ideas, and instead they spent immense amount of expenditure to construct atomic nuclear power plants, which is detrimental to the environment. And my question to the Iranian government is this: what are you going to do with the nuclear waste? When are you going to dump it? The issue of nuclear energy is nothing to do with the wishes of Iranian people. What the Iranian people want is democracy, and what the Iranian people want is human rights. I am very grateful to you and thank you very much for defending the struggles of the Iranian people. Today, the Iranian government has started negotiations with the 5+1 group at the IAEA, but I would like to point out to you that a day before these talks, the head of the judiciary said openly that the International Atomic Energy Agency is a spy, is an espionage network. So how can you possibly conduct talks with a country that labels a reputable agency such as an IAEA as an espionage organization? Recently, last week, they assassinated two nuclear physicists in Iran. One of them was killed as a result of this assassination attempt. Mr. Ahmadinejad has claimed that it's the UN Security Council that's responsible for this assassination. And if anyone else is assassinated, we know how to punish the UN Security Council. That is how this government thinks. So how can you possibly engage in a dialogue with such a government? I know that I am running out of time. I would only like to conclude by again saying that I am so grateful to you for supporting the democratic and just resistance of the people of Iran. Governments come and go. It's the nations that remain. Please let us do something to make sure that nations remain friends of each other all the time. I thank you all.
And courageous speech, because it will not be appreciated back home, but it is the truth, and the truth should be told everywhere. And I can say that both Liberal International and the ALDE group will play a very constructive role in furthering human rights in your country and supporting you and others. What I now want to do is first, also given the earlier two workshops on Central Asia, thanking the Naumann Foundation for its active involvement and all those who have been panelists.